The Great Hall of the Galactic Coalition was full of laughter. Hundreds of alien delegates from dozens of species sat in their seats, watching the old hologram play on the central stage. The image showed a human man in ancient armor. His face was tired and sad. His voice was rough and serious. "To any species who finds this beacon," the hologram said, "do not wake what sleeps in the hollow. We sealed it with our blood. We lost 11 billion souls learning this lesson. Heed our warning, or your civilizations will burn." The laughter grew louder. Some delegates slapped their tables. Others made sounds of amusement in their own alien ways. This was the annual meeting of the Coalition, and playing the old human warning had become a tradition. A joke, something to laugh at before the real business began. Ambassador Yuna stood at the back of the hall. She was a small woman with black hair tied behind her head. She wore the simple gray uniform of the United Earth Territories. Her face showed no emotion as she watched the aliens laugh at her ancestors. The Volfrani High Curator rose from his seat. He was a tall being made of living crystal. His body caught the light and threw rainbows across the walls. He was very old and very proud. His species had ruled 1,000 worlds when humans still lived in caves. "Humans and their dramatics," the curator said. His voice was like glass singing. 11 billion dead? Your species barely numbered 8 billion when you first crawled into space. This recording is clearly false. Primitive fear-mongering from a primitive species. Yuna did not respond. She had heard these words before. Every year, the same jokes. The same dismissal. The same proud aliens who thought they knew everything. A Marvathi trade prince spoke next. The Marvathi were large beings covered in thick scales. They controlled most of the galaxy's trade routes. Money was their religion, and profit was their god. "The Hollow is simply an unexplored nebula," the trade prince said. "Nothing more, nothing less. Our survey fleet departs in 3 cycles. Whatever resources lie within will fund our expansion for 1,000 years. We will finally prove that the human warning is just a story to scare children." More laughter. More amusement at the foolish humans and their silly fears. Yuna's aide moved closer to her. His name was Dowan. He was young, only 30 years old, new to the diplomatic service. His hands were tight fists at his sides. "Should we protest formally?" Dowan whispered. "This is insulting. They are mocking our ancestors." Yuna shook her head slowly. "They will not listen. They never do. We have warned them for 3,000 years. We have begged them not to go near the hollow. We have shown them the beacon recording 1,000,000 times. They think we are children telling ghost stories. But if the warning is real, it is real." Yuna's voice was quiet but firm. "Every human knows it is real. We feel it in our bones. We dream about it sometimes. The terror of the hollow is written in our blood. But we cannot make them believe. We can only wait for them to learn." The meeting continued. Trade agreements were signed. Border disputes were settled. The aliens congratulated themselves on their wisdom and their power. And the humans sat quietly in the back, saying nothing, remembering everything. Far away from the Great Hall, on a small blue planet called Earth, another meeting was happening. This one took place in a bunker that existed on no official map. The walls were thick metal covered with strange symbols. The air was cold and still. General Suji sat at the head of a long table. She was an older woman with gray hair cut short. Her eyes were sharp and hard. She had served Earth for 40 years, but her real training had started when she was just a child. Training for a day she hoped would never come. On the table in front of her, a screen showed the same transmission from the Coalition meeting. She watched the aliens laugh. She watched them announce their plans for the hollow, and she felt her heart grow cold. "Begin protocol, ancestor," Suji said. Her voice did not shake. The officers around the table looked at each other. Some of them were confused. Some of them were afraid. Only the oldest ones understood what she meant. "Ma'am," one officer said, "those ships have not flown in thousands of years. The sleepers have been dormant since before our recorded history." "Are you certain?" "I am certain." Suji pulled up a file on her screen. It was marked with symbols that no modern human could read. Symbols from a time before writing, before history, before memory. Our ancestors knew this day would come. They left us instructions. They told us exactly what to do when the galaxy decided to ignore the warning. She pressed a button on the table. Deep beneath the earth, in chambers that have been sealed for 8,000 years, machines began to wake. Power flowed through ancient circuits. Lights flickered on in the darkness. "Wake the sleepers," Suji commanded. "Prepare the old fleet. Send word to all watchers across human space. The galaxy has chosen to open the door. Now we must prepare to close it again." The officers moved quickly. Messages were sent through channels that did not officially exist. On 100 human worlds, men and women received strange signals on devices they had carried all their lives. Devices they had hoped they would never need to use. In a quiet apartment on a colony world, an old woman sat by her window. She looked like any grandmother: gray hair, gentle smile, soft hands that had planted gardens and held children. But when her device buzzed with the ancient signal, her eyes changed. They became hard and sharp, old, so very old. Her name was Yunji. She had been born 8,000 years ago, when humanity was young and the stars were new. She had watched civilizations rise and fall. She had loved and lost more times than she could count, and she had fought in a war that modern history had forgotten. She stood up slowly. Her body looked old, but it moved with a strength that did not match her appearance. She walked to her closet and opened a hidden panel in the back. Inside was armor that moved like liquid shadow, weapons that hummed with power from other dimensions, and a photograph of a young man with kind eyes and a brave smile. "Hello, my love," Yunji whispered to the photograph. "It seems the galaxy has forgotten again. They never learn, do they? But we remember. We always remember." She touched the photograph gently, then began to put on her armor. Across human space, others like her were doing the same. The sleepers were waking. The old fleet was preparing. And humanity was getting ready to pay a price the galaxy did not understand. Back at the coalition meeting, the Volthrani High Curator made his final announcement. The survey fleet will enter the Hollow in 3 cycles. This will be the greatest scientific expedition in galactic history. We will prove once and for all that the human warning is nothing but superstition. Yuna watched him speak. She wanted to stand up and scream at them. She wanted to beg them to listen, but she knew it would do no good. They had made their choice. Now they would face the consequences. Dohan looked at her with worried eyes. "What do we do now?" Yuna took a deep breath. "We go home. We prepare. And we wait for the screaming to start." She turned and walked out of the great hall. Behind her, the aliens continued to laugh. They did not notice her leave. They did not care about the small human woman and her primitive warnings. They would care soon enough. The truth was coming, and it would hit them very, very hard. The Morvathi survey fleet entered the Hollow Nebula with pride and celebration. 300 ships carried the finest scientists from 12 different species. Cameras broadcast live images to 10,000 worlds. Billions of beings watched as the fleet pushed deeper into the swirling purple clouds that had remained unexplored for so long. "This is historic," the fleet commander announced. His voice was full of excitement. "We are about to prove that the ancient human fears were nothing but primitive superstition. The hollow holds no monsters, only resources waiting to be claimed. For 6 hours, everything seemed normal. The ships moved forward. The scientists took measurements. The cameras showed beautiful images of strange stars and colorful gas clouds. Viewers across the galaxy watched with wonder. Then the signal stopped. Every ship, every camera, every communication device, all of them went silent at the same moment. 1 second, there was a live broadcast. The next second, there was only static. Coalition Command waited 1 hour before taking action. They thought it was a technical problem, equipment failure, nothing serious. But when the hour passed and no signals returned, fear began to grow. They sent a rescue fleet. 800 warships from the 3 most powerful empires in the galaxy. The Volfrani sent their crystal ships that could bend light itself. The Marvasi sent their massive cargo destroyers. The Tenari sent their fast attack vessels that could move between dimensions. It was the largest military force ever assembled for a rescue mission. Surely, nothing could stand against such power. They found the survey fleet drifting in the darkness. All 300 ships were still intact. Their lights were still on. Their engines were still working. But something was very wrong. The crews were still alive. Their bodies sat in their chairs. Their hands rested on their controls. Their eyes were open, but they did not move. They did not speak. They did not respond to any signal or command. And from their open eyes, black tears fell without stopping. What happened to them? The rescue fleet commander demanded. What did this? No one could answer. The scientists had no explanation. The doctors had no diagnosis. The crews were alive but empty. Their minds had been taken somewhere else, somewhere very far away. Then the hollow began to open. It started as a small crack in the fabric of space, a line of darkness that seemed to absorb all light. Then the crack grew wider and wider, until it became a massive tear in reality itself. What came through the tear was not alive in any way the galaxy understood. They were shapes that moved in wrong directions, angles that hurt to look at, colors that did not exist in normal space. They were beings from a place where the rules of the universe did not apply. The rescue fleet opened fire immediately. 800 ships unleashed everything they had. Energy beams, missiles, dimensional weapons, reality bombs. The combined firepower could have destroyed a planet in seconds. The beings from the hollow did not seem to notice. They moved through the fleet like shadows through water. Where they passed, ships did not explode. They simply stopped existing. One moment a vessel was there with 1,000 crew members. The next moment it was gone. Not destroyed, not damaged, just erased from reality. The fleet commander sent a final message before his ship vanished. They are not attacking us. They are editing us. We are being removed from existence. Tell everyone. Tell them the humans were right. Tell them. Then silence. Of the 800 ships sent to rescue the survey fleet, only 17 escaped. They fled at maximum speed, their crews screaming with terror that would never fully leave them. The beings from the hollow did not chase them. They did not need to. They had a galaxy to UNMAKE. Within 1 standard week, 47 inhabited systems went dark. The pattern was always the same. First, the communications would fail. Then the planetary defense networks would stop responding. Then, ships sent to investigate would find nothing. Not ruins, not debris. Just empty space where planets had once orbited. The beings did not conquer. They did not destroy in any normal sense. They simply removed things from existence. A planet with 4 billion people would be there one day. The next day, there would be nothing but gravitational echoes. As if the planet had never existed at all, fear spread across the galaxy faster than the beings themselves. Species that had been enemies for centuries begged each other for help. Ancient alliances were formed in hours. Everyone understood that this was not a war they could win alone. The coalition called an emergency summit. Delegates from every surviving species crowded into the great hall. There was no laughter now. No jokes about primitive humans. Only terror and desperation. Where are the humans? The Volfrani High Curator demanded. His crystal body was cracked with stress fractures. His rainbow light had dimmed to gray. They knew about this. They warned us. They must help us. Ambassador Yuna stood at the back of the hall, just as she had during the last meeting. Her face was calm. Her voice was steady. "You laughed at our ancestors," she said. "You called us primitive. You said our warning was superstition. For 3,000 years, we begged you not to open the hollow. For 3,000 years, you ignored us. We were wrong." The Marvathi trade prince cried. His scales had turned pale with fear. "We admit it. We were arrogant fools. But surely you will not let the galaxy die because of our pride. Surely humans are better than that." Yuna said nothing for a long moment. She let them wait. Let them feel what it was like to beg and receive no answer. "Humans do not want the galaxy to die," she finally said. "We never did. That is why we warned you. That is why we kept the beacon running for millennia, even when you made it into a joke. Then help us." Voices cried from across the hall. "We will." Yuna's expression did not change. "Not because you deserve it. Not because you have learned your lesson. We will help because that is who we are. We remember the cost of fighting these things. We remember the 11 billion who died to seal them away the first time. And we would not wish that fate on anyone. Not even those who mocked us." Her communication device made a soft sound. She looked at it and smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who had waited a very long time for this moment. "My grandmother has arrived," Yuna announced. "She will explain what happens next." The great doors of the hall opened slowly, and what walked through those doors made every alien in the room fall silent with a new kind of fear. She looked like an old woman. Gray hair, gentle face. The kind of person who should be sitting in a garden, watching grandchildren play. But she walked in armor that seemed to be made of living shadow. Her eyes held depths that no mortal should possess. And behind her came others. Men and women who moved in ways that were not quite right. Whose presence made reality itself seem nervous. The sleepers had awakened. And the galaxy was about to learn that humans had been preparing for this. They, since before any of their species existed. Grandmother Yunji looked at the terrified delegates with 8,000 years of patience in her ancient eyes. "So," she said softly, "you opened the door after all. How very predictable." The great hall had never been so quiet. Hundreds of alien delegates sat frozen in their seats. They had seen many things in their lives. War, disaster, the fall of empires. But they had never seen anything like the beings who now stood before them. Grandmother Yunji walked to the center of the hall. Her shadow armor moved like smoke around her body. Her eyes were deep wells of memory that seemed to contain entire ages. Behind her, the other sleepers spread out through the room. Each one looked human. Each one felt wrong. "Who are you?" The Volfrani High Curator whispered. His voice had lost all its pride. "You look human, but you are not. Not fully. What are you?" Yunji smiled. It was a sad smile, full of ancient grief. "I am human. I was born on Earth 8,000 years ago, when your ancestors were still learning to count. I watched the first human ships reach for the stars. I fell in love, married, had children. And then I watched my husband walk into the hollow with a bomb strapped to his chest, holding back monsters while we sealed the door. She paused, letting her words sink in. His name was Jinho. He was kind and brave, and he made me laugh. He held those things back for 9 minutes. 9 minutes of being unmade, piece by piece, and he never stopped fighting. That is what it cost to stop them last time. The trade prince found his voice. 8,000 years? That is impossible. Humans do not live that long. Normal humans do not. Yunji gestured to the sleepers around her. We are not normal. We are what humanity created to remember, to wait, to prepare for the day when the seal would break again. She looked around the hall at the frightened faces. These were the rulers of the galaxy, the most powerful beings in known space, and they looked like scared children. We tried to warn you, Yunji continued. We built the beacon. We recorded the message. We told you exactly what would happen if you opened the hollow. But you thought you were so clever, so advanced. You thought your science had explained everything. You forgot that the universe has dark corners that science cannot reach. A Tanari general stood up. His species was known for their courage in battle. But his voice shook when he spoke. What can we do? How do we fight them? You cannot fight them. Yunji's voice was firm. Not with your weapons. Not with your ships. The beings from the hollow exist outside normal reality. Your energy beings pass through them like light through glass. Your missiles cannot touch them. Your armies might as well be made of paper. Despair filled the hall. Delegates began to cry. Some prayed to gods they had not believed in for centuries. The galaxy had faced enemies before, but it had never faced something that could not be fought. But, Yunji said, and that single word brought silence. We can fight them. We have fought them before. That is why we exist. She raised her hand and made a gesture. Behind her, the wall of the hall became a window into space. And through that window, the delegates saw something that made them gasp. Ships were appearing from nowhere. Hundreds of them. Thousands. They emerged from fold space around Earth like ghosts materializing from fog. They were not like any vessels the galaxy had ever seen. Their hulls were covered with symbols that hurt to look at. Their engines burned with light that seemed to come from other dimensions. The old fleet, Yunji said, built before your species existed. Built with knowledge that has been lost and found and lost again. These ships do not fire weapons that destroy. They fire weapons that define, that give meaning. The beings from the hollow are chaos and emptiness. Our weapons are purpose and memory. The Volthrani curator stared at the fleet. You had this power all along. You could have ruled the galaxy. Why did you hide? Because we did not want to rule. Yunji turned to face him fully. We wanted to protect. We wanted to prevent this exact situation. But we knew that someday, some species would be foolish enough to ignore our warning. So we waited. We slept. We lived quiet lives among you, watching and remembering. She gestured to the sleepers around the hall. My friends here have been teachers, farmers, artists, merchants. We have lived thousands of lives while waiting for this day. We hoped it would never come. We hoped you would listen. But you did not. And now we must do what we were created to do. A younger human officer entered the hall. Her name was Mireille, and she wore the uniform of a fleet admiral. She walked with the confidence of someone who had trained her entire life for a single purpose. Grandmother, Mireille said with a formal bow. The old fleet is ready. All sleeper units have reported in. We are prepared to move on your command. Thank you, child. Yunji looked at Mireille with warmth and sadness mixed together. You know what this means. You know what may be required. I know. Mireille's voice did not waver. My family is known since the First War. We have trained for this. We are ready. The coalition delegates watched this exchange with confusion. What were they talking about? What was required? Yunji turned back to the assembly. The beings from the hollow cannot be destroyed. They can only be contained. The seal that held them for 8,000 years was not built with metal or energy. It was built with sacrifice, with memory, with the concentrated will of people who chose to give everything to protect others. She paused, and her ancient eyes grew even sadder. Closing the seal requires someone to enter the heart of the hollow and activate the mechanism. It is a one-way journey. The person who does this will be erased from existence. Not killed, not destroyed, erased, as if they never lived at all. Only our memories of them will remain. The hall erupted in shocked murmurs. The aliens could not believe what they were hearing. Someone had to sacrifice themselves completely? That was too much. That was beyond anything any species should be asked to give. But Myre stood straight and calm. She had known this truth since childhood. Every descendant of the first seal makers knew their duty. They were born for this moment. The coalition wants to join the fight, Myre said to Yunji. They have offered their remaining fleets. Yunji considered this for a moment. Then she shook her head. Let them watch. Let them see what humanity does when the galaxy fails to listen. Perhaps they will finally understand the weight of our warning. She walked toward the door, and the sleepers followed. Before she left, she turned one last time to the assembly. We will fight your battle for you. We will pay the price you were not willing to pay. But when this is over, you will remember. You will teach your children, and they will teach their children. You will not mock our warnings again. Then she was gone. The sleepers were gone, and the delegates of the Galactic Coalition sat in silence, finally understanding how small they really were. Outside, the old fleet moved toward the hollow. Ancient engines burned with the light of forgotten suns. Ancient weapons charged with the power of concentrated meaning. And across human space, billions of ordinary people looked up at the sky and whispered prayers for the sleepers, who were about to wake the galaxy from its arrogant dream. The battle for the hollow was broadcast to every world that still had the power to receive signals. Billions of beings across the galaxy stopped their lives to watch. What they saw changed everything they thought they knew about humanity. The old fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Hollow Nebula. 2,000 ships formed a wall of ancient metal and strange light. Across from them, the dimensional tier had grown even larger. The beings from beyond moved through it like shadows, spreading their emptiness across the stars. Admiral Myre stood on the bridge of the flagship. Its name was the Remembrance of Cost. It was the oldest ship in the fleet, built in the first year after the First War. Every panel and wire had been replaced 1,000 times, but the core remained the same. The heart of the ship held the memories of everyone who had ever served on it. All units, prepare for engagement, Myre commanded. Her voice was calm and clear. Remember your training. Remember who we fight for. Remember that we carry the names of the fallen. Across the fleet, sleepers took their positions. These were beings who had lived for thousands of years. Teachers who had taught generations of students. Artists who had created masterpieces under 100 different names. Scientists who had discovered and forgotten and discovered again. Now they returned to their original purpose. In his fighter craft, Sleeper Bogum checked his weapons one final time. He had been a poet before the First War. He had written verses that made people weep and laugh and hope. After the war, he had returned to his art. For 7,000 years, he had pretended to be an ordinary man who worked in a quiet library on a peaceful colony world. Now the poet was a warrior again. All fighters, this is Bogum, he said over the communication channel. His voice carried the weight of ages. Remember your mantras. The beings from the hollow feed on emptiness. They cannot unmake what refuses to be forgotten. Hold your memories close. Think of everyone you love. Think of everything that gives your life meaning." His wingman responded with a laugh. Her name was Jian. She had been a dancer in the old world. Her movements had been poetry in motion. Now she danced between stars, her fighter moving with grace that no ordinary pilot could match. "I have been remembering for 8 millennia, old friend," Jian said. "I do not know how to stop. My heart is so full of faces and names that there is no room for their emptiness." The coalition observers watched from a safe distance. Their ships hung back, recording everything, trying to understand what they were seeing. A Marvathi scientist stared at his instruments with growing confusion. "They're weapons," he whispered. "They are not firing energy. They are not firing matter. What are they shooting?" His colleague studied the readings. "It looks like information, concentrated meaning. They are shooting ideas at the enemy." "That is impossible. Ideas cannot be weapons. Watch." The old fleet opened fire. From every ship, beams of pure light reached toward the beings from the hollow. But this light was different from any weapon the galaxy had ever seen. It did not burn or explode. It illuminated. It defined. It gave shape and meaning to things that had none. Where the beams touched the hollow beings, something remarkable happened. The creatures that had erased entire planets suddenly hesitated. They flickered. They became less solid. Their wrongness became a little less wrong. The Velfrani curator watched with his mouth hanging open. They are fighting chaos with order. They are fighting emptiness with meaning. The humans weaponized philosophy. It was not a perfect weapon. The beings from the hollow pushed back against the assault. They sent waves of unreality toward the old fleet. Ships began to flicker and fade. Sleepers fought with all their strength to hold their existence together. Grandmother Yunji commanded from the heart of the fleet. She directed units like a conductor directing an orchestra. Her 8,000 years of experience guided every move, every shot, every decision. "Bogum, take your squadron into Dimensional Tier 7. They are trying to widen it." "Understood, Grandmother." Bogum led his fighters into the swirling darkness. Around him, the fabric of reality bent and twisted. Colors that should not exist painted the void. Sounds that had no source whispered terrible things in his ears. But he was a poet. He knew the power of words. He knew that meaning could stand against meaninglessness. He began to recite as he flew, ancient verses that had survived 8,000 years. "We are the keepers of names," he chanted. "We are the holders of memory. We are the wall that stands against the dark. We are human, and we do not forget." His squadron took up the chant. Their voices merged into a single sound that became a weapon more powerful than any missile. The dimensional tier shuddered. It began to shrink. But victory was not without cost. Jian's fighter was caught by a tendril of emptiness. Bogum watched helplessly as his oldest friend began to fade. "Jian, it is all right, old poet." Her voice was peaceful, even as she disappeared. "I have danced my last dance. I have lived 8,000 years. That is enough. Remember me. Remember all of us." Then she was gone, erased from existence. Only the memories of those who loved her remained. Back on the flagship, Myre watched the casualty reports with tears in her eyes. So many names. So many ancient souls finally finding the end they had carried for millennia. "Grandmother," she said softly, "we are losing too many." Yunji stood beside her, watching the battle unfold. Her old face was wet with tears, but her voice was steady. "We always do." That is what the warning meant. We knew the price. We tried to spare them. She gestured toward the distant coalition ships. But they had to learn for themselves. Pride is the most expensive teacher. The battle raged for 6 days. 6 days of constant fighting. 6 days of memory against emptiness. 6 days of ancient humans giving their final gifts to a galaxy that had mocked them. When the fighting slowed, the hollow beings had been pushed back. The dimensional tiers had shrunk, but they had not closed. The seal remained broken, and until it was fixed, the threat would remain. On the bridge of the remembrance of cost, Unji gathered the surviving commanders. Her face was gray with exhaustion. Even immortals had limits. "We have done what we can with weapons," she said. "But the seal will not close on its own. Someone must enter the heart of the hollow and activate the mechanism. You all know what this means." The room was silent. Everyone knew. Everyone had always known. Myre stepped forward before anyone else could speak. Her voice was firm. Her eyes were clear. "I volunteer. I have been waiting for this moment my entire life." Every descendant of the first seal makers knows their duty. "I was born for this." "Myre," Bogan began. He had lost Jian. He could not bear to lose another friend. "No," Myre held up her hand. "This is my choice. My ancestor Jinho gave 9 minutes to save the galaxy. I can give my existence to save it again." Yunji looked at the young admiral for a long moment. Then she walked forward and embraced her. Grandmother holding granddaughter. Ancient holding young. Both knowing this was goodbye. "I have watched Jinho's logs every year since I was 6 years old," Myre whispered. "I know exactly what I am walking into. I know exactly what it will cost. And I am not afraid." Yunji pulled back and looked into her eyes. "Your ancestor would be proud. I am proud. The whole of humanity is proud." Around them, the surviving sleepers bowed their heads. They had all made similar choices once. They had all given everything for a galaxy that did not understand. Now one more would join the list of names that only humans remembered. Myre straightened her uniform. She looked around at the ancient warriors who had fought beside her. She smiled. "Tell them about me," she said. "When this is over and the galaxy asks what happened, tell them my name. Tell them I was not special. I was just human. And humans do not forget. We do not surrender. We do not abandon those who need us, even if they mocked our warnings and laughed at our fears." She walked toward the shuttle that would carry her into the hollow. At the door, she turned one last time. "Grandmother, tell them the truth hit hard. But humanity hit harder." Then she was gone, and the fate of the galaxy went with her. Myre's shuttle entered the hollow alone. Behind her, the old fleet held its position, every gun trained on the dimensional tier, ready to provide whatever cover they could. It was not much. Where she was going, weapons could not follow. On the bridge of the remembrance of cost, Grandmother Yunji watched the shuttle's signal grow weaker as it pushed deeper into the chaos. Around her, coalition observers had been allowed to witness these final moments. She wanted them to see. She wanted them to understand the weight of what was happening. "Her signal is fading," Admiral Bogan reported. His voice was thick with grief. He had already lost Jian. Now he was losing another friend. "She is entering the core." Inside the shuttle, Myre flew through a nightmare. Reality bent around her in ways that her mind struggled to process. Colors screamed. Silence had weight. Time moved in directions that did not make sense. But she was not afraid. She had trained for this her entire life. Every descendant of the first seal makers prepared for this moment from childhood. They studied the logs of Jinho. They memorized every second of his 9-minute sacrifice. They understood that this was not a burden. It was an honor. "Grandmother," Myre said through the weakening communication link, "I can see the seal mechanism. It is still intact. Jinho built it well. He built it with love," Yunji replied. Her voice cracked with emotion. "He built it thinking of all the lives it would protect. including yours. I know. Myra smiled, even though no one could see her. I am going to activate it now. Tell the fleet to prepare for the closure. And grandmother, thank you for everything. The communication went silent. On the flagship, Yoonji closed her eyes and whispered words in a language that had not been spoken in 8,000 years. A prayer for the dying. A blessing for the brave. In the heart of the hollow, Myra touched the seal mechanism. It was old beyond imagining, built with technologies that modern science could not explain. But it recognized her. It recognized the blood of the seal makers. It had been waiting for someone like her. She placed her hand on the central node and felt power flow through her body. It was not painful. It was warm, like stepping into sunlight after a long darkness. She understood now what Jinho had felt in his final moments. Not fear, not regret, just purpose. I am human, she whispered. I am the keeper of names. I am the holder of memory. I am the wall that stands against the dark. The seal began to close. Across the hollow, dimensional tiers started to shrink. The beings from beyond screamed in frequencies that shattered stars. They tried to push back, to fight the closing seal, but Myra held firm. For 7 minutes, she held them back. 7 minutes of being pulled apart and put together. 7 minutes of fighting chaos with pure will. Her body began to fade. Her thoughts began to scatter. But she did not let go. Remember me, she whispered to the universe. Remember all of us. Then she was gone, erased from existence. Her body, her mind, her very being removed from reality. Only the memories of those who loved her remained. And the seal closed. The dimensional tiers collapsed in on themselves. The beings from the hollow were pulled back into their prison, screaming as they went. The wrongness that had infected the galaxy began to heal. Stars that had been dimmed grew bright again. On the remembrance of cost, alarms signaled the completion of the seal. Yoonji opened her eyes and let the tears fall freely. It is done, she said. Myra has closed the seal. The hollow is contained. The coalition observers stood in stunned silence. They had just watched a young human woman erase herself from existence to save a galaxy that had mocked her ancestors. None of them knew what to say. The war was over, but the galaxy would never be the same. 3 months later, the Galactic Coalition gathered at the ancient warning beacon. It still orbited the dead star, just as it had for millennia. But now it was surrounded by a fleet of honor guard ships from every species. The beacon had been restored and expanded. New recordings had been added to the old message. New warnings in new languages. The joke had become a monument. Ambassador Yuna stood before the assembled delegates. Grandmother Yoonji was at her side, looking every bit the ancient warrior she was. The hall was full, every seat taken, every species represented. You asked us once why we kept warning you, Yuna said. Why we never stopped, even when you laughed. Even when you called us paranoid primitives clinging to mythology. She activated a projection. Faces appeared in the air above the assembly. Thousands of them. Every human who had died fighting the hollow across 8,000 years. From Jinho, who held the door for 9 minutes, to Myra, who closed it with 7. Because we remember, Yoonji said. Her ancient voice carried through the hall without effort. We remember what forgetting costs. We remember names your historians never recorded. We remember sacrifices your philosophers called impossible. We remember because someone has to. She turned to face the Volthrani High Curator. His crystal body had been repaired, but the cracks would never fully heal. He was a changed being. They all were. You have 10,000 years before the seal weakens again, Yoonji continued. Use them wisely. Train your warriors. Write your warnings. Build your defenses. And when your descendants laugh at the old stories. She smiled, and it was not unkind. Remember how you feel right now. The curator bowed his crystalline head. We will remember. I swear it on my honor and the honor of my species. We will never mock the human warning again. Many have made that promise. Yunji's eyes were knowing. Time erases all things except human memory. But we will hope. We will always hope. The ceremony continued for hours. Species that had been enemies stood together to honor the humans who had saved them. Statues were announced. Holidays were declared. The official history of the Third Hollow War became required reading for every child in the coalition. But the most important changes were quieter. On 100 worlds, young beings began to listen when their elders spoke of ancient dangers. Fear-mongering became preparation. Mythology became contingency planning. The galaxy had learned its lesson. For now, on Earth, in a small garden behind a quiet house, Yunji knelt in the soil. She was planting flowers over a memorial stone. The stone had Marie's name carved on it, even though her body was gone forever. It was the only marker the young admiral would ever have. Ambassador Dohwan found her there. He was older now, no longer the nervous aide who had stood behind Yuna at that first meeting. He had been appointed to replace Yuna when she retired. Now he was the voice of humanity to the galaxy. The coalition wants to apologize formally, he said. They are offering technology, territory, seats on the High Council. They want to repay the debt they owe us. Yunji did not look up from her planting. Tell them we do not want payment for doing what was necessary. Tell them to remember. That is all we have ever asked. Dohwan was quiet for a moment, watching her work. And if they forget again? In 10,000 years, when new species rise and old warnings fade, Yunji smiled and looked up at the sky. The old fleet was still visible, a constellation of ancient ships maintaining their eternal watch. They would rest now, sleep again, wait again, but they would be ready. Then we will be here. We always are. She stood and dusted the soil from her ancient hands. Humanity does not forget. It is our blessing and our curse. We carry every name, every face, every sacrifice. They live inside us forever. The galaxy will never truly understand that, will they? No. Yunji turned to face him. For a moment, Dohwan saw the woman she had been 8,000 years ago. Young and fierce and heartbroken and unbroken. They think we warn them because we are afraid. They do not understand that we warn them because we love them. We love all life, even life that laughs at us. That is why we fight. That is why we sacrifice. That is why we remember. She picked up the photograph of Jinho that she had brought from her apartment. She placed it beside the memorial stone, next to a newer photograph of Mireille. Two souls, 8,000 years apart, united by the same sacrifice. What if the galaxy mocks our warnings again? Dohwan asked. Yunji's smile grew wider. It was the smile of someone who had seen empires rise and fall, who had loved and lost more times than anyone should have to bear, who had given everything and would give it all again if needed. Then the truth will hit them, hard. She looked at the photographs of her loves, lost but never forgotten. It always does. She returned to her planting. Dohwan stood with her in silence for a while, then bowed respectfully and left. He had a galaxy to speak to, warnings to give, lessons to teach. In her garden, Grandmother Yunji tended her flowers and spoke softly to the photographs of the dead. The sun set over Earth, painting the sky in colors of memory. And somewhere above, the old fleet kept its watch, ready to wake again when the galaxy forgot. Because humans remembered. They always remembered. And they always would. That was the truth that remained. That was the truth that would hit hard. Forever.